Okay, this week's Parsha is a very dramatic turning point in Jewish history, the story of the Meraglim, the spies. And, of course, the consequence of this very tragic episode is that it was decreed upon the Jewish people to remain in the desert for the entire 40 years, and only their children would be allowed to come into the land of Israel. And tonight we're going to talk about this story. By way of introduction, let me speak about two mitzvahs that are written in the parasha immediately after the story of the Meraglim. We have the mitzvah of challah, that when dough is made, there is a mitzvah to take a portion of the dough and to give it to the kohen, to give it to the priest. That's the mitzvah of challah. Now, midaraisa, by Torah law, the mitzvah of challah only applies to produce that was grown in Eretz Yisrael. It's wheat that was grown in Eretz Yisrael. Make dough out of it, make bread out of it, is a mitzvah of challah. But rabbinically, this mitzvah of challah applies outside of Eretz Yisrael as well. So women today bake challah. They take a portion. Of course, it isn't given today to the kohen because it is impure, and a kohen can only eat the challah if it's pure, so it's burnt instead. But we practice this mitzvah, but under Torah law it only applied in Eretz Yisrael. And the other mitzvah is the mitzvah of nesachim, that when a person brings an animal sacrifice, there's a mitzvah along with it to bring a wine offering, to pour wine on the altar. And that mitzvah as well only applies in Eretz Yisrael. Even though in the desert, karbanos were brought in the Mishkan, but the mitzvah of nesachim, the accompanying wine offerings, only began when the Jews entered Eretz Yisrael. So we have two mitzvahs, the mitzvah of challah and the mitzvah of nesachim. The Ramban asks, what is the connection of these two mitzvahs to the story of the Meraglim? And the Ramban answers that these mitzvahs were given just at this point as a consolation. In other words, when it was decreed upon the Jews that they would not be allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael, and they were told that you're going to wander for 40 years and you're going to die in the desert, but your children will go into Eretz Yisrael. So, perhaps they began to doubt that. Maybe our children will also end up dying in the BaMidbar. So Kadosh Baruch Hu gave mitzvahs that would only be put into practice in Eretz Yisrael as a way of reassuring the Jews that it's true, you're not going to make it, but your children will make it, and they will observe these mitzvahs. So these mitzvahs are given as a consolation, that it's true that you're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, but your children will go, and they will observe the mitzvah of challah and the mitzvah of nesachim. This is what the Ramban says. And the Medrash Rabbah, again in the same spirit, quotes a well-known verse in Kehelas. It says in Kehelas, Lech echoil b'simcha lachnecha, go eat your bread in joy, u'shesei b'leiv tov yeinecha, and drink your wine with a glad heart, ki kvar ratza elokim es maasecha, for God is pleased with your deeds. There's meaning, if a person, let's say, has committed terrible sins, so if he takes them to heart, he may have no appetite. You don't feel like eating. You're so troubled by guilt. So here we say that when a person has done tshuva, a person has repented, we tell him, go and eat with a glad heart, eat your bread and drink your wine, because God has declared himself to be pleased with your deeds. Now this verse, of course, is a verse that comes to mind after Yom Kippur, let's say. Well, the entire Yom Kippur, we are engaged in doing tshuva, repentance, we don't eat, we don't drink, but what do we feel the moment that Yom Kippur is over and that burden of guilt has been lifted off our shoulders? I mean, this is certainly the verse that comes to mind, It's if God is telling us, go home and eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with joy, because God is now pleased with your actions. So the Medrash says that after the Chet HaMeraglim, after the sin of the spies, it's true the Jews made a mistake, but the Jews repented. Now it's true that sometimes repentance cannot remove the consequences of sin. Sometimes the sin is a reality, and what has to happen has to happen. But nevertheless, there was a certain appeasement, and therefore God tells us to eat your bread and drink your wine with joy, and therefore He gives us these two mitzvahs that are associated with bread and wine. The bread meaning the mitzvah of challah, which is associated with bread, and the mitzvah of nesachim, which is associated with wine, as if to say that God has forgiven the sin, even if some of the consequences are in place, but eat with a hearty appetite because God has been somewhat appeased. So that's really the connection of these two mitzvahs to the story of the Meraglim. Now, let's talk about bread and wine a little bit. There may be something deeper here, a very profound message of bread and wine. But let's talk about a more basic question first, even before we get to bread and wine, which is one of the most fundamental questions about the balance of trust in God and effort in achieving our life goals. Very, very difficult problem. In other words, how much effort, time, energy should we invest in trying to advance ourselves? And at what point should we say that it's in God's hands, and if He wants us to be successful, we'll be successful. If He doesn't want us to be successful, we won't be successful. Because where do you draw the line? It's a very interesting thing. The Mesilas Yesharim talks about this in the 21st chapter of the Mesilas Yesharim. He's talking about Chasidus. He's talking about piety, living a life of piety. And he says that one of the great barriers to piety is worry. Is worry. Now, if a person is worrying about how he's going to pay the bills and cover his expenses and so on and so forth, that doesn't leave a lot of peace of mind to be able to engage in acts of piety. So how do you deal with the problem of worry? So the Mesilas Yesharim says that the answer to the problem of worry is bitachon, is trust in God. If you trust in God, then you can do away with worrying. And this gives him an opening to discuss the concept of bitachon. And in that chapter, he says a very, very interesting thing. Now, I'll read you a few of his words. Just a person in theory could sit and do nothing. And the God's decree that you should have sustenance would have been fulfilled without any effort on your part at all, in theory. Imlo, if not for the fact shekadam haknas l'chol b'nei adam, that there was a penalty that was imposed on all mankind. Where was this penalty imposed, this punishment? In the Garden of Eden. God decreed after the sin, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. In other words, it was meant to be different. It was meant to be that we should be able to relax, no pressure, no worries. We would live in the Garden of Eden and eat fruit off the trees. That's what it was meant to be. But as a consequence of the sin, there's a punishment. You have to eat bread by the sweat of your brow. So that's why we have to do something. We have to exert some effort. We have to work, have a job. Al came therefore, chayiv adam li'ishtadol eze hishtadlos. Person has to do some type of effort, l'tzarech parnasaso, for the sake of a livelihood. Shekein gazer hamelach ve'elyon. So decreed the supreme king. But harei ze kimas shepareya kol minhu enushi. This is like a tax that the human species has to pay, which you can't escape from. But a person has to know that it's not the effort which really yields the results, it's God's providing. Rav Dessler quotes this Michtav Eliyahu, and he takes it to mean as follows, that since it's really a penalty, a punishment, to the extent that you can reduce it, avoid it, evade it, you should. I'll give you an example. One of the other penalties that was decreed in the aftermath of the sin was that be'etzev tel dibonim, that childbirth would entail pain, labor pains. So do we say that women can't have anesthesia in childbirth? Because there's a heavenly decree that women have to have pain in childbirth. Now the Catholic Church actually holds that way. Right? Says if this is a decree, then it has to be. You can't do anything to mitigate the pain. But Jews have a little different way of looking at things. And they say, it's a curse, but there's no obligation to maximize curses. If you can minimize the curse, then you minimize the curse. So therefore, you can have an epidural or some other anesthesia and reduce the effects of the curse. The curse is there, but whatever you can do to reduce it, you're allowed to do. So one would say the same thing, that if there's a curse of that you have to eat bread by the sweat of your brow, you have to exert some effort, but to the extent that you can minimize it, you should minimize it. So Rav Dessler says that all you have to do is enough effort so that your parnasa, your livelihood, won't appear to be an open miracle. You have to do enough effort so that if everything works out, no one will say, it was a miracle, manna from heaven. So how much effort do you have to exert? So he quotes from a great person, Reb Zundel Salanter, very approvingly, that he said that I buy a lottery ticket. That's my ishtadlos, that's my effort. I'll buy a lottery ticket. If the big one comes in, no one will say it was a miracle. After all, somebody wins every week. So this week it'll be me. That's enough ishtadlos. That's enough effort. And this is the approach Rav Dessler takes, that a person in life should really, really reduce the amount of effort that he exerts. It's a decree, it's a curse, but a person should do whatever he can do to minimize the curse. It's not so simple. I have to say, it's really not so simple. It's a much more complex subject. There is some truth to it, but there's a lot more to the issue than meets the eye. And let me share with you a famous Gemara that we've quoted many times. If you look at the verses after the sin, so the first thing God tells Odom is Kaitz v'dardar tatzmiach lach, that the earth will produce thorns and thistles, v'ochalto es esav asodeh, and you're going to eat the grass of the field. And then in the next verse it says, by the sweat of your brow you'll eat bread. So there seems to be an internal contradiction. First it says you'll eat grass, and then it says you'll eat bread. So the Gemara Pesachim tells a story. That first God told Adam Harishon, as a consequence of the sin, you're no longer going to eat the fruit of the Garden of Eden, you're going to eat grass. At that moment, Zolgu Einov Demos, Adam Harishon burst into tears. And he said that I and my donkey are going to eat together at one trough. Donkeys eat grass. So imagine if it's going to be that I'm going to eat grass. So, imagine I'm sitting side by side. Here's my donkey. Here's me. And our heads are in the same feeding trough. So he burst into tears. So Kadosh Baruch said, okay, I hear your objection. By the sweat of your brow, you'll eat bread. You're not going to eat grass, you're going to eat bread. But if you want bread, it has to be by the sweat of your brow. Now this is an amazing thing. You see, Adam HaRishon originally wasn't meant to work. If Adam HaRishon would have accepted the gezeira, the decree, that he eat grass, it would have been effortless. Just like the donkey eats grass effortlessly. But Adam didn't want to be equal to his donkey. He wanted to be better off than his donkey. So therefore Hashem said, okay, you want to be better off, you'll get to eat bread. But if you want to eat bread, bread comes at a cost, which is by the sweat of your brow. So the Gemara says that the great sage Abaya said, Ashreinu imamadnu b'rishayna. We would have been fortunate had we stuck to plan A, to eat grass effortlessly, instead of opting for bread, which requires effort, which requires the sweat of our brow. We would have been better off had we stuck with it. Apparently, Adam HaRishon didn't think so. So obviously we're dealing with something which is very, very subtle. That Adam HaRishon did not think he'd be better off eating grass effortlessly. He thought he'd be better off eating bread at a price. And the Baya, only hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later, after following and examining the experience of humanity, came to the conclusion, no, they really would have been better off the other way. So what's the issue? We pointed out that there is a hint. There's a hint from the Ramchal in another one of his works, Derech Hashem, that the idea behind our having to exert effort is a different issue entirely. It's not a curse, it's not a punishment. It really is something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us to have a sense of fulfillment and a sense of our own dignity. That we should feel accomplished. That we were able to address and satisfy our own needs. Rather than feeling that everything is handed to us on a silver platter, our success and our achievement is a function of our own efforts. This gives us a gratification. This gives us a sense of self-sufficiency. It's an honor. We feel good about ourselves when we feel that we can supply our own needs. And that's really what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you'll eat bread, but it'll be by the sweat of your brow. It'll be gratifying, because you'll feel you earned it, you created it. Now the problem is this. The problem is, so is this meant to be a punishment or meant to be a curse? That's the issue. Adam did a tremendous sin, so God says, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do you a big favor. I'm going to make you feel good about yourself by giving you the opportunity to create your bread. I mean, should a sin result in that? Now, the issue really is like this. Because really the whole thing is really a mistake. What is man meant to feel good about? What is it a real accomplishment? What is a man really meant to feel a sense of accomplishment and achievement in life? You know, the verse says, Al yishalel chacham b'chachmaso, that a wise person should not praise himself as being wise. Vayishalo gibor b'gvuraso, and a strong person shouldn't praise himself for being strong. Vayishalo asher ba'asher, and a rich person shouldn't praise himself as being rich. Ach bezos yishalo hamishalo, in this alone should a person praise himself, haskel v'yadaya, you see, to the extent that he knows God. Because what is the real accomplishment in life? The real accomplishment of life is a person's spiritual pursuits. That's what a person should be proud of. When I learned Torah, I did mitzvahs, I came close to God, I came to understand God. And that's a genuine accomplishment. The fact that I was able to eat something that was a little better than what my donkey eats, like that's an accomplishment? Like that's something to be proud of? My donkey lives in a barn and I live in a split level. Like that's a real achievement? It's a terrible thing It's a real consequence of the sin. That as a consequence of the sin of the Eitz Hadas, Adam became so degraded that he reached the point that he defined his advantage over the animals simply in that he could address his needs in a more lavish, more elegant manner. Which is really, it's a shameful thing. In other words, in the Garden of Eden, before the sin, Adam never would have thought that he needs to eat bread so that he has some advantage over his donkey. In the Garden of Eden, he understood that he's greater than an animal because his intellect enables him to strive for spiritual attainment. But after the sin, he was so reduced, he was so diminished, that he began to think that what really is my life? My life is the extent to which I can satisfy my creature comforts. And therefore, if I can eat grass like a donkey, then I am a donkey. There has to be bread. So Rabbi Baruch Hu said, okay, I'll give you bread, but you should know I'm going to make you feel better about it. It won't just be that your donkey eats grass and you eat bread, but you'll be proud of the fact you eat bread because it'll be produced by the sweat of your brow. It reminds me of a very interesting story. The great Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, who died in the early 60s, once pointed out that in his time, I guess the late 50s, there was an explosion in entertainment technology. Television was becoming popular, radio, and so on and so forth, and just a few decades before that, none of these media existed. So we asked the question, in a spiritual sense, what's the answer? Why all of a sudden did God allow for these inventions? So he said an amazing thing. He said that human beings' lives became so wretched, so miserable. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed for the creation of entertainments so that at least they could have some diversion from their misery. It's an amazing thing that, for many people, their joy in life is the fact they can be entertained. But if not for that, what would their lives be? I mean, is their work ennobling? For many people, not. Many people's work is menial. Maybe they're not even making as much money as they'd like to justify working in such terrible conditions. So at least they have entertainments, they have amusements. That's really what's going on over here, that Adam Rishon has become so diminished that the whole satisfaction of his life is that he gets to eat bread and not grass. So Rabbi Baruch Hu says, okay, listen, I'm going to add something extra. That not only will you eat bread and not grass, but you'll even be able to take satisfaction in the bread because it was created through your effort by the sweat of your brow. So what does bread symbolize? Bread symbolizes this yearning to feel a sense of achievement, a sense of accomplishment. That's what bread is. Right? Bread, as opposed to grass, as opposed to anything else that we eat, bread, in the Torah's symbolism, is God's granting us the ability to feel a sense of achievement and accomplishment, and that's why he gave man bread. That he shouldn't be like a donkey who eats grass, but he should have the privilege of eating bread for his own satisfaction. But it comes to an amazing thing, that the effort we exert, not only for bread, but for all the things we enjoy, is not only a penalty, not only a punishment. It's also something that God does to make us feel good, to give us a sense of accomplishment, but in a sense, it's a sense of accomplishment that is really a replacement for something which is more real. You see, the real sense of accomplishment should be our spiritual accomplishment, but degraded as Adam Rishon was, God said, I will give you, in Hebrew, a tachlif, means a replacement. I'll give you something else with which you can have a sense of satisfaction, which is bread. So, Adam Rishon is right, and Abaye is right. There was Abaye, looking back over hundreds and hundreds of years of human history, came to the conclusion, we would have been a lot better off had we stuck to plan A. had we devoted our lives to spiritual pursuits, and in that we would have had our sense of accomplishment, we could have lived with grass. We would have said, okay, so we're eating grass, big deal. Donkeys eat grass, what else do we eat grass? We're not animals, right? What does an animal think about?
Eating.
Nothing, right? What do human beings think about? They think about God, they think about the divine, they think about philosophy, the lofty things. The fact that we eat the same thing and even eat the same way doesn't mean we are the same as animals. So therefore we would have been better off. We'd have no sweat and no effort and no hard work and no stress. We wouldn't have to take tranquilizers, right? We'd have a very, very comfortable life, and our humanity would be expressed in our spiritual pursuits. So Abaye, looking back over the course of human history, says that we would be better off. And in the spirit of Abaye, the Mesilas Yesharim perhaps says the same thing. He says that it's a curse, and if you could reduce the curse, minimize the curse, it's the best thing, because really it's not the ideal. But the reality is, in our diminished state, in other words, to us, that it is very important to eat well and live well and have a nice house and drive a nice car and all those things. This is a kindness on God's part that instead of giving it to us, He enables us to create it through our own efforts, so we should have that sense of satisfaction, that sense of achievement. So really, why do we work? It all depends. For people who are on the level of the Mesilas Yesharim and on the level of Abaye, who see the reality that really are the successes and the achievements of which we should be proud of, the spiritual ones, it's just a curse. And if you can minimize the curse, minimize the curse. But those of us who are not quite there yet, for us, for whom it is important, we're like Adam Harishon, that we feel that our humanity will be compromised unless we're able to live on a little bit higher plane. So then having to exert the effort, the sweat of our brow, really is something which gives us tremendous satisfaction. All these ideas are contained in the idea of bread. That's what bread is all about. Bread is God's granting us the ability to feel good about ourselves, to feel a sense of accomplishment, because we've created that higher standard by which we live, as opposed to the animals who simply eat the grass. Now this is all very, very good if you are successful in attaining bread. But what if you're not successful in attaining bread? What if your efforts come to naught? You work, and you're met with failure. So what do you need then? You need wine. It's not a joke. Well, what is wine all about? Well, let's talk about the first time wine was introduced, right? The Torah tells us that the first wine was produced by Noach, right? Noach comes out of the ark, the entire world is destroyed, and what is the first thing Noach does?
Gets drunk.
He plants a vineyard, and he produces wine, and he gets drunk. And the Medrash says that he was depressed, he was brokenhearted. Now look at this entire world, everything is a shambles, everything is ruined, everything is laid waste. And he needed something to make himself feel better. And that was wine. Now the Medrash says an amazing thing. The Medrash says when we planted that vineyard, so the Satan came, and the Satan was looking over his shoulders, what are you doing? So I'm planting a vineyard, planting grapes. He says, what's grapes? What's that? So grapes are very good. Grapes, first of all, they're good fresh, they're good dry, they're very sweet, and you can make wine out of it. It's good tasting, makes people happy. So the Satan said, make me your partner. Let me be your partner. So Adam Rishon said, fine, you want to be my partner? We'll be partners. Okay, so the Satan came, and the Satan brought a sheep and slaughtered the sheep under the vineyard, under the grapes. Then he brought a lion, and he slaughtered a lion under the grapes. Then he brought a chazir. You know what that is? No, I didn't know how to say that. Slaughtered it under the grapes. And then he brought a monkey, and he slaughtered that under the grapes. So Adam Rishon says, what does this symbolize? So it's like this. It says, before a person drinks wine, he's like a lamb. He's timid like a lamb before he drinks. then he drinks, he becomes bold like a lion. But if he drinks too much, then he becomes filthy like the swine, like the chazir. Filthy and degraded. And if he drinks a lot over his limit, then he becomes like a monkey, jumping around and dancing and carrying on. So this is what the Sultan told Adam about wine. Right, wine is the antidote for the pain we experience in our quest for bread. When we are unsuccessful in our quest for bread, which means the sense of satisfaction, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of achievement, so we make ourselves feel better with wine. That's what the verse says. The verse says that the ayin is samach l'lav enosh, that wine makes people happy, and the Gemara says that wine was created to comfort the mourners. Tnu shecher la'oved v'yayin l'mari nefesh. Give wine to the people who are embittered. And the people who are embittered because of their failure in achieving bread, their appeasement is wine. Now, that doesn't mean that life would be better if we could do away with bread and wine. Because bread has a place and wine has a place, as we said. Bread has a place because, as we said, it's man's dignity. That's what Adam Rishon felt. That we should eat bread, we shouldn't live as animals, we shouldn't eat grass, we should live on a human standard. Right? And it should come as a function of our effort, because this is our dignity, our humanity emerges in this process of seeking bread. So it has a place. But sometimes the quest for bread, the quest for fulfilling the desire for feeling special, feeling good about ourselves, is a distraction from the more important spiritual pursuits. So the quest for bread takes us far away from what we really should be pursuing. And wine as well. Wine, is a very good thing if we use it to relieve ourselves from the slight pains of life. But take it too far, we lose our rationality, then we are abusing it. But each has a place. The truth is that the story of the Meraglim may all be about this idea. And let's understand it this way. There's a very famous question in the commentaries. We know that the Meraglim sinned when they came back with their negative report. That we know. We know there was a terrible sin. Was the sending of the spies in the first place a mistake? Was it a sin? Should Moshe not have sent spies? Or was it a proper thing to do? Now, Rashi takes the position that it was a mistake, which at first glance is very, very strange, because the parsha begins, Hashem told Moshe, send Meraglim. So how could you possibly say that it was a mistake? God himself commanded Moshe to do it. So Rashi says, but if you read the story here in this week's parsha, and you read the review of the story in Parshas Devarim, and you put the two versions together, you get a better picture of what's going on. Because in Parshas Devarim, it says that the initial idea to send Meraglim did not come from God. It came from the Bnei Yisrael. The Bnei Yisrael came to Moshe, and they said, let's send spies. And Moshe thought it was a good idea. And then our parsha tells us that God consented, but Rashi says he consented reluctantly. God really thought it was not a good idea. But once the people asked for it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had no choice but to consent. Why? Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would say, no, don't send spies, the Jews would have said, he's hiding something. There's something there he doesn't want us to know. So once the people demanded spies, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had no choice but to say, okay, you can send spies. But really, it's not a good thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu foresaw from the very beginning it was a mistake. The Ramban takes a different approach. The Ramban says there was absolutely nothing wrong with sending spies. He says, why? He says, a yesod, a very fundamental principle, and this relates to our original discussion, which is that in life, a person is obligated to be mishtadel, to exert effort to achieve his goals. We only rely on bitachon, we only rely on trust in God when we've exhausted all the means that we have at our own disposal. When there is nothing more that we can do, then we say we're in God's hands. But as long as there is something reasonable that we can do, we are obligated to do that. That's what the Ramban says. In other words, which is bipshuto, not like Rav Dessler understands from the Masilas Yesharim, which is that a person should minimize and do as little as possible and should suffice with buying a lottery ticket. He says, no, that's not a reasonable approach. A person has to do what he can do, what is within his power, and beyond that point, he relies on God. Rabbeinu Bechaya quotes this Ramban, and he brings a verse in Mishlei, which says, "Sus muchan liyom muchama," the horse is prepared for the day of battle. V'lashem hatshua, but salvation is God's. Meaning, you go to war, so it's true that the ultimate victory is in God's hands, but we still have to prepare and do whatever is within our power. So we prepare weapons, and we prepare strategies, and we prepare the horses when horses were used for war. Sus muchan liyom milchama, the horse is prepared for the day of battle. At the same time, we recognize that Lashem Hatshua. We have to do whatever is within our power. We recognize that it is a necessary condition for success, but it is not a sufficient condition. We have to do what we can do, and then it all depends on God crowning our efforts with success. But we can't say, well, I'm not going to do anything. It's in God's hands. That we can't do, yes?
But this notion, this approach wasn't said for the Israel in the Midbar.
So we'll see in a second. Okay? So the Ramban says, therefore, there was nothing wrong with sending spies. Because the purpose of sending spies was to gather military intelligence. To determine where are the strong points, where are the weak points, where should we enter, what should we avoid. So that type of effort, gathering military intelligence, is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. It's obligatory. And there was nothing wrong with sending spies. The problem was that the spies came back and they slandered the land and so on and so forth. So in their report they had committed a sin. But the initial sending of spies was totally acceptable. Okay, that's the Ramban's approach. The Netziv asks a very serious question on the Ramban. The Netziv says, wait a minute, that's not true. Because it seems from the Midrashim that God made it very clear in advance that if not for the sin of the Meraglim, the conquest of Eretz Yisrael would have been accomplished through supernatural means. There's a lot of evidence in the Midrashim that if not for the Chet HaMeraglim, the conquest would have been miraculous. And God informed them of this fact. So if so, why is it necessary to send spies? Of course, if we aren't promised miracles, then we have to do our effort. But if we're foretold in advance that it's going to be miraculous, then why should we have to exert? Why bother sending spies? So the Netziv says like this. The Netziv says that it's true that God had informed them that the conquest would be miraculous. The Jews did not want that. The Jews wanted that the conquest of Eretz Yisrael should be natural. Why? Why wouldn't you want a miracle? So Netziv offers the following conjecture. It says like this. The more God gives you, the more He can expect of you. Right? That makes perfect sense, right? The more I give you, the more I expect in return. So, in the Midbar, the Jews received a lot from God in a very supernatural way. They received the manna from heaven, the miraculous waters of the Be'er. They were enveloped by the clouds of glory. They were getting a lot from God. And therefore God had very, very high demands of them in exchange, right? The more God gives us, the more He expects of us. And therefore, in the end of Parshas B'haloscha, you discover amazing things. That Jews make like minor mistakes, seemingly small slip-ups, and the consequences are just like over the top. You know, you have the misayanim. A few people are grumbling that, well, you know, it's so hard to walk. We've been traveling 3 days, no rest. All of a sudden, fire breaks out and begins consuming people. Moshe has to daven that the fire should subside. And then you have a few other people that are complaining about the food. It says, remember the fish used to be so good. And all of a sudden, God says, okay, there's going to be slough for a month. You're going to eat it till it comes out of your noses. And all the people that ate it died. And Miriam says a word against her brother. All of a sudden, there's leprosy. So the Bnei Yisrael said, you know, we can't live like this. We can't live on that high plane. We can't live with God giving us more and more and more and more, because then He demands from us more and more and more and more. We can't live up to the expectations. So, how about a change in plan? Let's tell the Ribono Shel Olam, thank you, but no thank you. We don't want that we should receive Eretz Yisrael miraculously. We want to receive it naturally. We'll conquer it through our own efforts. So as a result, since you'll be giving us less, therefore your expectations of us will be less, and we'll be able to live accordingly. So they believed that they could change God's agenda. There was God put an offer on the table, and we could reject it. We could say, no thank you, we don't want it. That's what they thought. So God offered to conquer the land for them with nisim, with miracles. They said, no thank you, we'll conquer the land through our own efforts, and as a result, since we're getting less from you, your demands from us will be less, and we'll be able to survive without these terrible calamities coming all the time. That's the Nitziv's approach. So how do the Jews demonstrate their decision to conquer the land naturally? They send spies. They said, we'll send spies. That shows that our plan is to conquer it through natural means. That's why we're gathering intelligence. And God will get the message, and He will allow us to do it that way, and His unreasonable demands will end. That's the approach of the Nitziv. It's clever. But it may be that there's a much more basic issue, which is this. That, when you receive something as a gift, and you don't exert any effort for it, you don't work for it, right? You feel belittled. You feel not accomplished. You can't take satisfaction in that. This is the idea of the Mukubal Mukul, now the Kisu, for the bread of shame. When you receive something for nothing, it's ultimately demeaning. So when God says, okay, don't worry, I'm going to take it Eretz Yisrael, I'll conquer the land, there'll be miracles, it'll be fantastic. So the Jews felt, why would we want that? We want bread, right? We want the satisfaction of a job well done, that we accomplished something, we achieved something. That's what we want. So it's not only, as the Nitziv says, a consideration, they didn't want to receive because then they would owe God. They wanted to have that sense of accomplishment. We did it, we worked, we exerted effort, we achieved our goals, which, as we said, is the essence of what bread is. The problem over here is that it was counter to what God wanted. And as the story unfolds, there was a terrible calamity and a terrible sin, and it was decreed upon them that they'd be wandering in the desert for 40 years. In other words, their quest for bread was a failure. So what do they need now? They need wine. That's what we said, that's what wine is. Wine is that which makes us feel good, right? When our quest for bread has failed. And this is really the appeasement that God offers, the mitzvahs that God offers in this parasha, the consolation that don't worry, you've made a mistake, but still I value you. That really is the symbolic meaning of these mitzvahs. And therefore, that these mitzvahs are mitzvahs that are related to bread and wine is poignant. Right? This is really the issue of the whole story of the Meraglim, the yearning to want to feel the sense of accomplishment and fulfillment by conquering the land through human effort, the failure and the frustration that comes as a result, and the appeasement, which is the essence of what wine is. And therefore, that's really the symbolism of these two mitzvahs, challah and nesachim, bread and wine, just at this point in the parsha. Now, the truth is that it's really the same error as Adam Rishon made, as we said, because really, what is the purpose of Eretz Yisrael? Right, the real purpose of Eretz Yisrael is it is the place where we can achieve our spiritual destiny. Chazal tell us, Avira de Eretz Yisrael machkim, the air of Eretz Yisrael makes us wise. And the Rav Dessler Zecher Tzadik Levracha, most of his public career was spent in England, in London, and he established a kollel in Gateshead. In the last few years of his life, he lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he wrote that ideas that took him weeks of effort to develop in England, he was able to develop in hours in Eretz Yisrael. Because he had the sense that the air of Eretz Yisrael was something special. We go to Eretz Yisrael, we don't feel that. You know, there's a famous Rebbe. It was a Rabbi David of Avrich. He wrote a sefer called Bas Ayin, and he lived in this city in Avrich in Europe somewhere. I don't know, Poland, Hungary. I have no idea where it was. And there once was a Shelach who came from Eretz Yisrael. And this was a rare thing. People from Eretz Yisrael should come to Europe. And this Shelach came, and of course they honored him to speak about Eretz Yisrael. And he got up and he said, Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael. He says, the soil of Eretz Yisrael contains diamonds. Contains diamonds. So he was so moved by this report, he decided to move to Eretz Yisrael. And he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and lo and behold, there are no diamonds. He looked at the soil, there's no diamonds. So he couldn't understand. So anyway, one day he ran into that Meshulach. And he told the Meshulach, I don't understand. He says, when you came to my town in Europe, you said that the soil had diamonds. And that's why I moved here, and I come here, and there are no diamonds. So the Meshulach said, just because you can't see them, doesn't mean they're not there. So he was taken aback. So he locked himself up in a room, and he studied Torah, right, in seclusion for 18 hours a day for a period of months. And then, after his studies were concluded, he announced that Shabbos he's making a kiddush in shul. And he gave kiddush in shul. And they asked him, what's the occasion? So he says, when I came to Eretz Yisrael, he says, I didn't see the diamonds. And now finally I've seen the diamonds, I'm making kiddush. That's what Eretz Yisrael is all about. We go to Eretz Yisrael, even in my own lifetime, it isn't quite the same experience as it once was today. I remember the first time I was in Eretz Yisrael, when you still got off the plane and you went down the steps and you landed on the ground of Eretz Yisrael and you saw people kissing the ground. Now you come into the airport like any other airport in any other part of the world. It's not the same thing as it once was. But we have to know that's because we are spiritually compromised. We can't see what Eretz Yisrael is. But Eretz Yisrael really is a place which has a quality for achieving spiritual pursuits. And the Bnei Yisrael should have understood that. And the Bnei Yisrael should have understood that we don't need to conquer the land through our own effort. That's not what it's all about. It's not that which is going to give us satisfaction. That's the mistake that Adam Rishon made. Adam Rishon thought that if he eats grass, he'll have nothing to be proud of. But if he eats bread, he can take pride that he eats bread. Right? That was a mistake. As Abaya said, Ashreinu Amadna B'Rishaynu, we'd be better off eating grass. Because that which we should be proud of is not the fact that we can satisfy our material needs through our effort. That which we should be proud of is the fact that we have the capacity for spiritual attainment. And that really was the mistake that was made in the generation of the Meraglim. They said that we're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. What is the source of our pride going to be? The fact that we can say we conquered that hill, we conquered that valley. It was our effort, it was our bravery, our courage, our strength that did it. And therefore they turned down God's offer to be given the land miraculously, to make it easier for them to use it as a spiritual tool. Yes?
So, according to this, do I understand correctly that even had the Meraglim brought back a positive report, it still would have been wrong to send the Meraglim? There was no way they could win this by having sent the Meraglim.
No, this is the idea that the Netziv is saying that really, under normal circumstances, it's true. You have to do through natural means what you can. But here, God made an offer. God said, I'm going to give it to you miraculously. Right? Why should you reject the offer? So our conjecture is they rejected the offer for different reasons than the Netziv says. They rejected the offer because they wanted to take pride in the fact that they conquered it through their own effort. That's a mistake. That's like Adam Marishan opting for bread over grass. Just like that, Abaya says was a mistake, because we would have been better off eating grass and devoting our energies to spiritual pursuits. It's the same thing. Because why should we take pride in the fact that we conquered the land, that we control the land? Take pride in the fact that we use the land in a spiritual way. That should be what we're proud of.
So what is using land in a spiritual way? Because Lamai said they had to be an agricultural society, they had to plant and sow, and it had to be a natural existence once they got it.
That's true. That's true. But that's that's a minor part of it, right? That's not what we're meant to be proud of there. You know, if we have to do it, we have to do it. Maybe we wouldn't have to do it. Maybe if we would have conquered the land in the miraculous way, maybe the entire course of history would have changed as well. Right? Maybe the reason we have to spend so much time in cultivating the land is because we opted to conquer it in a natural way. I mean, all these things could be related. But the point is that if the offer is on the table to receive it miraculously, and you reject it because you're saying, I want to have that sense of satisfaction, that already is a mistake. Right? That already is a failure to recognize what Eretz Yisrael is all about.
So fundamentally then, would it be correct to suggest that the Bnei Yisrael didn't really understand the purpose of going to Eretz Yisrael?
That's I think his idea. In other words, it's just like Adam Harishon. It's the exact analogy. Adam Harishon did not understand what is special about a human being. He thought after the Chet that what is special about a human being is that he eats bread instead of grass. He wears clothes instead of walking around without. So therefore his intellect, his superior talents are expressed in the pursuit of a better lifestyle. That's a tragic error. That's a tragic mistake. And that essentially underlines the chet of the Meraglim as well. And therefore, if they would have understood what Eretz Yisrael is all about, of course they would have been happy with God's offer to give it to them on a silver platter. Question?
Where was Moshe Rabbeinu in this decision-making process? Clearly, he understood the issue.
No, but that's, see, on that the Netziv now turns to Rashi. The Netziv holds, just like Rashi says, that once the Jews said, we want it this way, then there's nothing you can do about it. In other words, like which is what Rashi understands. If that's where they're at, right, you can't just say, no, we're not going to do it this way, we're going to do it differently. In other words, sometimes the choices you make create a reality that has to be dealt with. Yes?
You mentioned the wine, and it was like a lack of achievement, so you got this out where they have wine. But really, the Torah talks about wine and red meat, where it's simply, for joy. Here it's like to forget about your problems, that's what you have in the wine.
What is the idea that wine is a vehicle for joy? it is that way because it's not that we're happy. We're happy with the wine. Right? Wine enables us to be happy.
No, but
I'm saying, simcha is basa v'yai, right?
Yeah.
So, is that what happiness is all about? Let's ask a little question. It's nothing to do with what I'm saying tonight. I'm just asking a simple question. If God wants us to be happy, what are we meant to be happy about? Meat and wine? Like, that's what we're meant to be happy about? I mean, God gives you a commandment to be happy because you had a fine rib steak and a glass of Chardonnay?
Like at a house now, like the Husan and the color.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. You go to a wedding, right? You're very happy. Baruch Hashem is a couple. They found each other. They love each other. They're going to establish a new family, building another house in Klal Yisrael, right? So we're very happy about that, right? But you have to go through traffic for 45 minutes, right? It's hot, you're kvetchy, you're hungry, right? You had a hard time getting here, and you got things in your mind back from work, right? So it's very hard to feel happy, right? So we give you something nice to eat, and something to drink, and now you can be happy. But you're not happy because you're not meant to be happy because wow, did I have a great glass of wine today, right? The wine is really only a means of disconnecting exactly from everything else that's going on to focus on what the real occasion is.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know how important it is that the scotch at the wedding has to be the $400 a bottle variety. Right? In other words, if the real simcha is not the joy of the scotch, but it's the joy of the occasion. But hey, you need something to, in a sense, help you loosen up, right? What difference does it make whether it's the cheap stuff or the good stuff?
That's a status symbol. The guy's bringing 18-year-old scotch. It's like a status.
Yeah, but doesn't that cheapen the event? In other words, you have an occasion. There's so much to be happy about, right? So I'm saying this. Says I know you. Says you don't share in my joy. You don't share in my occasion. You're not happy for my children, right? The only thing that'll make you happy is if I give you the 18-year-old scotch. I mean, isn't that like an insult? Right? I mean, is that what he thinks of you? Now, of course, it's not that way, right? The reason he's really serving it is for a different reason, right? The reason he's serving it is to honor you, right? To show this is what I think of you, right? So the truth is like this: he should serve the expensive stuff, and you should drink the cheap stuff. Right? But here's the point I'm making. In other words, that's not what it's about. It's not about the quality of the liquor. It's really about, we need sometimes artificial means in order to, not to make us happy, but to allow us to be happy.
Isn't that a very slippery slope?
What?
Isn't that a very slippery slope, what you just described?
Life is a slippery slope, right? but you see, but we're not discussing whether a person should drink at a wedding or not. That's not the issue. Maybe he shouldn't drink at the wedding. We're saying when a person drinks at a wedding, what is the kavanah? What is the idea behind it? Right? You're right. The Telzer Rosh Hashiva once said like this. He said that on Sukkot in the Beis Hamikdash, so there was the Nisuch HaMayim. They poured water on the Mizbeach. The whole year it's wine, but Sukkot they poured water, right? So what does that mean? It's like this. You see, wine. It says wine makes people happy. It's not only drinking wine makes people happy. The presence of wine makes people happy. But let's think about it for a second. Simchas Torah, people should have to drink. Where would such an outlandish idea have come from? But Nebuch, even through the centuries, were in Golus, they were persecuted, tormented. So even Simchas Torah, they needed to drink. Right? It's not that you drink in Simchas Torah. Purim is a different story. Purim, the whole avoda is ad lo yad. That's a whole different idea. But Simchas Torah, it's only a concession for people that need it. So you do it. Okay, everyone. Thank you.